Just send a few little comments to you guys. Just getting pumped up with you guys here in the comments. Very nice to see you all again for our weekly Christian Witnesses of Jah Saturday discussion show. We usually meet Saturdays. Sometimes we'll change it. It's usually around this time. Sometimes I'll change it, but most often it's Saturday around this time. After today's show, I'm not going to do a live stream for the rest of July. I'll be back in August. So I'm going to take a few weeks off and, just get caught up on a bunch of other things. Still a lot happening. I might have some uploads. I have them, but I have a lot of other things I have to do as well. So I'll make as much time as I can for the channel during the next few weeks while I'm off the live streams, but I'll be back. So I'll either return on a Thursday for a Free and Exposed live show or for another one of our Saturday shows. Unless another time is picked, in which case, again, I'll put a notification up. I usually make a community post, so you can definitely figure out if we got something coming up or if there's like a break in the action. Of course, there's always things going on. I usually do post things, some of which may or may not relate directly to everything we usually talk about. I might post a few other things that get not necessarily political, but they're related to political things. And I don't mind at least posting and expressing some supportive comments for things I think are better than the alternatives without necessarily endorsing anything in ways that would be, I think, inappropriate. But that's for me to decide. It's for you to decide, right? We don't push any political agenda here. We're Christians, but all of us are actually people too, So we exist in the world, just like we read in the New Testament, just like the Christians in the New Testament. And we have to participate or not, depending on what our view is in terms of our group. Everything outside our three primary beliefs. One God the Father. Love him with our whole heart, soul, and mind. Jesus, our sent forth Savior from heaven, from the Father, to redeem us from our bad behavior, right, in a permanent way versus the temporary way that we read about so frequently in the Old Testament. And with respect to other cultures in similar ways, appeasement of gods and different things, sacrificing things that mean a lot to you, right, because of doing things that you're either, depending on your culture, trying to honor the god or appease the god. And in a Judeo-Christian sense, right, we see our behavior before God, and in our view as Christians, Jesus, but just keeping it generally applicative to Jews and Christians for a moment. Our behavior is the result of events that took place when our species was created, when humans were created by God. I've gone through all the Genesis accounts, and I think they're all reasonable and present, in effect, exactly how things can be shown to have unfolded and consistent with science, credible science, in pretty much everything. I think a lot of people don't realize that, or they just choose to not accept it or not look at it, or they present counter-arguments in ways that don't address the primary issue. Right? So we're often presented with people who claim things like, there's not enough water to cover all the mountains. Oh, yes, there is. Not only above and on top of the earth and in frozen places, but underneath there's even more than all of that combined. And just what the Bible says happened, right? The deep springs broke open. So, you can believe whatever you want. You can ignore all the sunken cities and buried places like Göbekli Tepe and clearly speak of an advanced worldwide civilization that has been totally destroyed, wiped out, almost erased. Only its bones left for us to see, so we could we could verify. Yeah, that is what happened. There were all these places here that got wiped out, just like the Bible and other records say. So you can say whatever you want to say, But today we're going to give Jah praise, right? He's the God of the Bible. He's the one we believe created us not to be perverts, like we see so often today. Like I was saying about our behavior, why we had to, in old times, make sacrifices to God to appease him. And then he provided the means by which we could really appease him or show faith in what he provided for us that appeases him. In our view, that's the Messiah, the foretold one, the one whom all pre-Christian Jews looked forward to, that would restore them, right? And fulfill the promises made by God through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we believe Jesus represents the fulfillment of that, and that Christians and Jews together and everyone else who believes, right? There are other groups, right? Muslims believe in Jesus, different kind of belief, right? We have a lot of conflict with some groups like Muslims and others, Mormons too, right? These all express faith in Jesus, but there are clearly differences in the extent to which they do, or the Bible says you have to. But then we deal with groups like Trinitarians that have been here for a long time, right? They've taken over, basically, in large part, the whole Christian structure, right? And for a long time, like 1,000 years or more, controlled in ways where the general populace couldn't even read the Bible, barely had a Bible, if they did. And when they did, it was based on hardly any real full copies. Yeah, a lot of texts, a lot of manuscripts, so different languages and old enough to make it verifiable. And then even after that, of course, right, after the first English Bible, similar with the Old Testament, Dead Sea Scrolls, we have enough to verify these things happen. And these events are not just biblical. They're corroborated in many respects, from Jesus to the flood to Genesis, with extra biblical evidence. So while you may not agree, that's how we see a lot of these things, if not all of them, entirely consistent with history, science, and what we read in the Bible. We don't see disagreements, and that doesn't mean we think everything is clear, or that you can't create a problem, or that we have every single thing we need to know to answer every question. No, I think we actually have more than we need. Right? We could always add more. I'm not saying only the books in the Bible are reliable or credible history, even related to God's people, right? Maybe some books, whether Old or New Testament. It's not really the question. The question is, do we have enough here? And if we need other information, is it there? Yeah, it is. And as long as it's consistent with each other, we shouldn't have a problem, right? It's only when we have these inconsistencies, when we add more material and it becomes less consistent, well, that's a problem. So we try to keep it with basically just the Bible, but not only the Bible. It's just our most authoritative collection of texts, not because of the Catholic Church or really anyone. Right? We do agree and believe they were able to see essentially what we see, but we're not just accepting the Protestant or the Catholic Bible or anyone else's opinion. I just said, while we may have relied on those to some extent, because we all have to learn on those who've come before us and who know more, until we know more, to be able to determine if they knew what they should have known, or at least told us all about it, right? And so we all have to be responsible. And so we look at the Bible and we say, okay, well, yeah, those are the best texts. Those are the things that are best available for us, Old and New Testament, that represent the least contradictory, earliest, most best represented in terms of text and languages and history, corroboration, related to these people in this God Jah and the Messiah. I don't see any problem with that. And I've come to that conclusion on my own. And after having, of course, learned through these other groups who've decided those were the same things, but I didn't just read those. I've spent well over 30 years reading far more than just the Bible. And that's my opinion. That's how I see it. That's what I've come to accept. I don't have to do that. I've left other groups that I learned a lot through, that I was very close with and had much to gain from, and very little to lose if I stayed and kept doing it, but I didn't agree. I couldn't continue to see things the way they did. I'm talking about Watchtower. And I also don't agree with Trinitarians, right? I could have easily jumped over there and just become, more mainstream and, right? Had this whole story. I'm ex-Watchtower apologist, so even I see Trinity now. No, I didn't do that. Why? The same reason I left Watchtower. I don't agree. It had nothing to do with what I could gain it's really a question of what I could lose, I guess, or gain. Ultimately, if you really believe, right, it's everything. Both of the answer to both questions. What do you gain? What do you lose? Well, everything, right? You either lose your entire life forever or you gain it forever. That sounds like everything to me. So do you really believe? That's the main question. Maybe we can, of course, answer that for other people, but they can't answer it for me or for you. A lot of people try to, and that's where we get this kind of interference, right? Whether it's people motivated by the dragon or dragon theology, thinking we're heretics and we're hurting people, and some are. We're not saying they're, but they are too, and have for a long time. So it's really complicated, confused. It's the dragon. He is who we believe he is, and he's doing what we believe he's doing, and we're told he's doing and does. That's not good for us, right? He's going to be in high-level deception in ways that are going to require attention. Right, to details. Where's the devil? He's in the details. What's he getting you to agree with there? What are you accepting? It's a lot more difficult not to when you're face-to-face with it, unless you've already been faced with it and realized, no, that is not going to get me what I want. That's not going to bring me even the happiness. These people who don't follow Jah or Jesus, it's like, they're all gone, right? Or they're just, non-Christian, pagan, worldly, whatever. They're not really gaining anything, right? I don't see that they're really bringing themselves much more, if any, and I don't think any advantage in terms of longevity, health, strength, ability to, future prospects. They've thrown it all in basically to right now, or some belief that they can't really verify. They just think maybe reincarnation type stuff, right? It's really no objective information. There's a lot of subjective information for that, but short of someone being able to verify that they were here before in a way that would contradict the whole purpose of them being reincarnated, so the fact is, and so those very same stories are where people have these flashbacks. Well, can these people who believe in reincarnation tell us something like that we can use to prove? Do you have information or not from your prior life? Or, is there something that happened that you can recall in a way we can verify? Can't be that hard. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know. That's not objective evidence, right? History, text, things you actually see. That's outside of you. It's not how you're feeling. It's just right there. No, that doesn't mean we can't put things together that we can't see, like gravity, spirit, like we were talking about the other day, right? When something's alive versus dead, but it's all still right there physically. So we have ways of verifying things and coming to conclusions that are useful. We don't have beliefs that are gone, right? Or they're so incredible or that require this special unique interpretation of text that no one else can really figure it out and stuff like that. No, this is pretty straightforward what we do and why. And so we don't believe we have to know everything. Nobody does. And if you think you do, well, I don't think you do. I think you know. And we all do act like we know things. Like I often say, anyone who's left your house or apartment or wherever you exist today just to go somewhere else for whatever reason, if you interacted with anybody in a vehicle or of some kind, I would say a vehicle, not necessarily limited to that, but certainly if you're driving, most people, I would say most by far, right? If not everybody, but some people have phobias, so it's not everybody. They don't think they're going to have an accident. They don't think they're going to die. And yet you go ahead and pull up the statistics for how many people die every day or get in a car accident. So, oh yeah, it's very possible. It's not just possible. It happens all the time. And yet you think it absolutely is not going to happen, or I don't think you would go out and drive, right? I think when we reach that point where even though we don't know, we believe enough in the structural stability of our environment and our abilities to manage it and other people to deal with their own affairs sufficiently so that we don't get injured. We just can't foresee it. And yet it happens because that as much as we want to have faith in normalcy or even ourselves, right? We can get impaired. Other people can be impaired, make a mistake, not be thinking, right? And they should be, or thinking when they should be watching. Things happen. And mistakes, they're mistakes. So, or intentional. So it's not a question of knowing absolutely. I don't think it ever is, actually. It's a question of, do we believe strongly enough to act on something? Even if it's wrong, right? I mean, people act on things strong, but give their life, right? Whether it's something like with Watchtower, blood or no blood, or, I'm just using examples here. Although Watchtower is easy to use in that way, right? My point is, people believe in things strongly that aren't always correct. So now they may think they're correct, and so they'll still give their life, right? They get to do that. People get to choose. Isn't that cool? At least in most countries. There are other countries that don't give that option to people. But either way, maybe it helps control the lawlessness in some ways we don't appreciate. All I know is people get to choose. And while people can be wrongly influenced, and we should be sensitive to that if we're with someone in a way where we can tell, oh, this person's being deceived. They don't understand something critically important to what they're doing or thinking. Do you think something like that is important enough to engage with someone over? Well, that's different. That's up to you. It's up to us. It's kind of what we're supposed to do, right? Help people. All right, so in this show, this Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion number 50, I wanted to talk about not just that, how our perspective is where it concerns the Bible, the books in it, right? Things that come up, questions that I think will just routinely come up with people who reconsider things or who think about things in other ways, but they've had these questions, these ideas where, where did the Bible come from? Why do you believe those books? I think if we just think about why we accept these things, the answers will come right to us. We were talking about the other day, Luke 21. Jesus says he'll tell you. That's hard to believe in all the time, though, I know. So it's just easy to try to get the information in our head so we're ready, right? Master understands that. We're not told not to study or prepare at all. But worrying, right? It was about worrying. Had to do with, things that wouldn't show faith. And so I think as long as we have that, if we have the faith, we know we'll be given what we need, but we don't want to be totally ignorant in our data, And we know the Master will help us use it properly, but we got to kind of help ourselves be ready. We're supposed to do that, whether it's anything, right? Driving, anything. We shouldn't just go out there and rely on the Master. Well, Matt, I don't know anything about driving this car. I just turned 16, but I was told to rely on the Master. I'll be given the words to say. No, that's not what it's talking about, right? So you need to do your part. We'll need to do our part and at least have a basic awareness of things he's already told us. Then he'll bring those words back to your mind because you've been listening to him. You've been reading what he says, the examples that we talk about. And so, of course, he's going to let you see the wisdom of all those things. He's going to let you see how he dealt with it. He'll help you see how that relates to something you're doing. So now how can we do this more in a way that is more local, we'll say? With technology today, we do have an advantage, something we should, cultivate if practical and beneficial, not to make it hard on people, but argue all the time, but sometimes may call for it. Like I say, we can't always say when that time will come, but we try not to be always in conflict. That doesn't help anyone usually. So now there are times, and they're very clearly definable, I believe, right? we're going through a time like recently, that's different clearly from what our normal approach to these things is, even though that's part of it. Whether it's Paul and Barnabas getting upset and taking it, these things are going to happen. We're not going to have everything together, and I don't expect to. It's very important to me to show everybody by example that you can be a normal person and still be an effective Christian. You don't have to be perfect. I'm not trying to make mistakes, or do anything. I don't think I do anything unusual or extreme. I get a little heavy with Sam sometimes, but he's heavy with me, right? And look at the way he talks about other people. I don't want to get off on Sam, but just by, I was listening the other day, him denigrating Dr. White, right? He's talking about how Dr. White doesn't know anything, how he's not as smart as he pretends to be, something like that. Sam says that a lot. But I know that's just Sam getting upset, really. He may or may not believe that. He's more familiar with Dr. White, but I don't think, how could that really be true, right? No one's as smart as they may seem, but, it's not like Dr. White hasn't been doing stuff to show he knows that, no, Sam, that's not correct, right? And then when I call Sam, like if I say he's an idiot, like several times I have done recently in some of those bombs, because at least, and especially one last year, because he was going crazy and he's doing things that are unusually gone, right? I'm not like making it up. I may be being harsh. I was listening to my Destroying Trinitarians is a clip from the 8+ hour bomb last year. We'll get to our main subject in a moment. This kind of relates to it, right? So things happen. I'm using this as an example, really across the board, right? But that doesn't define us. I think Sam lets it define him more than other people do, but I don't think he cares also. And if that's how he feels, that's what he should do. We're not really in a position to tell Sam. If he genuinely believes that's how the Lord wants him to behave, he'll find that out one day, right? Other than the times where he, in my opinion, gets right in my face. You got to understand, what would you do as a man if someone got right in your face and started attacking your mother? Yeah, exactly. See, that's like go time in every language and culture with a man, right? Well, Sam does that to everybody. So he just think of, he's comfortable with that, but you see the difference. We got to just let it go or deal with it when it gets right in our face, right? Or don't. If you don't want to do that, you don't think that's go time spiritually, hey, good for you. Well, some of us do. Some of us do, when it gets to our credibility, calling us out personally, challenging us, and mocking. It's all this stuff happening, at a rapid clip and pretty frequent pace. So these things have reasons. They may not be right. It may not have been right that Paul and Barnabas got so angry it had to be recorded in the New Testament, and they couldn't even figure out how to work together to go on a missionary trip. That's pretty embarrassing. Guess what? I don't care. The totality of everything that Paul and Barnabas did to sacrifice for the early Christians and to show their faith, that little thing that nonetheless is significant enough to show their humanity, I don't care. Right? I'm so happy that they wrote these things and did these things, and in spite of being unable to do basic things at times, they didn't quit. What did Jesus say? You don't quit. You keep going till the end. No one take your crown. Conquer like I did. Sit down. All right, you're going to rule these nations. You're going to help bring about the type of nations we've all been wanting. We've all hoped would develop. But because of the dragon and the perversion, we had to go through this process. This is what the Father chose to go through to defeat the dragon and to get glory, right? The Son is all about that. The Son is there to make sure we glorify the Father through him. That's the only way to do it, right? So he's like he makes sure. Ain't no glory getting through him if it's not proper to the Father, right? No. Okay. So you think of the same thing with Michael, right? But of course, Jesus is bigger than that now. He's got all authority. I'm just using Michael as an example because look at how serious at times. Michael, the angel of Yahweh, right? Obviously the same, but, we even give latitude there, but we know Trinitarians, gone. These are not beings that play games. They understand this. They're merciful. They also know we're going to die because we're sinful and the Father's righteous, and everything is a gift, including life. None of it is required. It is all from the Father and only exists because he allows it to. So we have to thank him, and even in spite of ourselves and imperfections, continue to do so, no matter what. Okay? No matter what. Isn't that what the Son did? Do you call yourself a Christian? Okay. So it's a no matter what. Yeah, you may fail. You will fail. We all fail, but no matter what, you get back up. Okay? That's not failing. Failing isn't falling. Failing is not getting back up. So as long as you don't collapse and break down to the point where you just feel so sorry for yourself that you can't get back up and try again, you're good. As long as your faith motivates you to do that, to not quit. Because it's not about whether or not you do everything right, You're going to do some things wrong. What's more important? You don't quit. You keep going on. That's what matters, right? Look at the criminal who died with Jesus. Okay, what mattered? He didn't quit. He was given a chance at the end. Okay, what's it going to be? You going to quit? Yeah, this guy just quit. You? That's all that matters. Are you going to quit when it matters? So we should try not to ever give up on anyone, right? Even Sam. But we're not going to just hang around on him, right? And hope it all starts just transforming into this non-blasphemous behavior. We appreciate Sam and things he does. And it's a complicated matter, right? A little complicated with Sam. And anybody. He's more of an example I'm using right now. Not really for Satan, right? It's not our job to get into his judgment. We already know what that is. So talking about it, we don't want to intrude upon the Father's judgment. It's already written down. So we don't think about that. We just read it, and that's what's written down. We're not here to alter judgment. We are here to deal with each other in ways that allow us to identify the wicked one, right? A person of lawlessness, whoever's trying to break things up. Think of Jude, think of all of them, right? We can't just ignore potential problems. Well, in our case, we have an advantage. Not only in being somewhat new and relatively small, although I love our group and I love how we're spaced out. And of course, our doctrine, right? Our doctrine is exactly what it should be, based on the Bible, 100%. Nothing added to allow each other to help each other, but allow each other to exist as Christians dedicated to the Father through the Son. Right? That's the formula. I think we can all see that. Trinitarians probably see that and think that is, but they're locked into Trinity, right? It's a whole different metaphysic, whole different standard of judgment, acceptance. So don't get your hopes up, okay? Spending too much time with people who think you're a heretic only has so much advantage. Yeah, you can try, and it's a good thing to try sometimes, of course, and especially if they don't understand certain things and you can see that, and you're like, hey, no, right? But also understand that, like with other groups or anybody, right? Even ourselves, unless you're really committed to the truth, and we can't always tell that about people. We can tell about ourselves. We know internally, and the Spirit knows, right? It can bear witness to us. It knows those deep thoughts, and we're convicted, right, by those. So you got to make sure that your inner thoughts are really in line with your belief in what's right. You're not lying to yourself, in other words, right? People do that a lot. They gaslight themselves. Oh, yeah. Well, that's what a lot of these groups do, right? Some form of gaslighting, right? When Catholics think they're the ones responsible, appointed with a succession of popes from Peter in a way that fits the New Testament model, right? So they tell themselves this. Maybe there's some evidence to it, but they tell themselves it in a way that's like 100%, no question about it. Where were you, right? Where have you been? Well, boy, you heretics here? No, we're the church. We've been here. You wouldn't have the Bible without us, right? Stuff like that. So they tell themselves this, and it reinforces their faith. Same with Watchtower, right? Oh, you guys, who's doing the work? Who's doing the work? Man, we've been doing the work. Who's so obvious? Who did the New World Jah's name? And we restored it, all this stuff. And just don't talk to us about the times we restored it where it doesn't belong. And we've never changed it from the way we've used it, but the way it should be. Oh, they don't care about that, right? They're going to keep telling themselves they're special and unique until the Watchtower says we're special and unique in other ways. Okay, the whole chronology, the whole prophecy thing, time of the Gen. No, we got that wrong. But guess what? We've been doing so much work. Jehovah's name. Who's been doing the work? So it's still us, right? Maybe something like that. I don't know, Watchtower. We'll see. I know it's not. I'm saying it's hard. All right. So with us, though, just kind of got into this because I was trying to say and show by using Trinitarians, Watchtower, and other groups as examples, we don't have that problem. You see? We don't have this problem where we're loaded down with all this false doctrine. Don't worry, I watch our believe whatever you want. I don't care. Same with Trinitarians. Believe whatever you want. I don't care. But in our view, we can see it pretty clearly. Okay, those doctrines, they're not going to help us, right? The Trinity, the dual nature, 1914, 1919, right? These things are bad for us. They're going to make us look, they're not only not scriptural, we can show they're basically wrong, right? Conflict with explicit statements anyway. And where it concerns Watchtower, right? You're not even supposed to be enforcing prophecies like this to this extent, especially where they only benefit you, right? Keep you in power and position over everybody and control of all the money in ways that doesn't fit the biblical model. Now, it's not about people selling their stuff and laying them at the feet of the apostles. No, they redistributed to other people, to everybody, according to their need. You guys don't do that. So knock it off, right? We talk about it more, but right there, right? We've been talking about shortcuts too, right? Where do you cut it off? It depends on you, but right. So there's oftentimes, I think, shortcuts to a lot of things that will save you time or aggravation if it's gotten to that point. Some people like it, so I'm not really talking about you. But for some people, it's like, hey, what do I do? These people won't stop, right? And never stop arguing with me. Well, just tell them, hey, I've already told you what I believe. I already showed you that text. Yeah, I know what you think about it. So I don't agree. You don't agree with me. Well, so let's just move on since we don't agree with each other. That's what normal people do, right? Now, remember, these people have been poisoned, a lot of them. I have had to deal with people, whether it's the dragon people, right? The Trinitarians, that not saying all of them are evil or false. The theology, okay, dragon theology. We can we've traced it. We've shown we know what we're talking about. You can disagree, but it's not like we're making this stuff up with nothing, right? There's pretty good evidence, I think. So, but they think because of the dragon, right, and the whole council, all of it, all these councils and creeds that are apart from what the Bible says to use as a standard, a measure for people's orthodoxy or correctness, truth. No, doesn't matter if you're willing to get along with people in these other groups. You want to try to work it out with them. We try at times. I'm not saying no one never try. Be realistic, okay? They think you're heretics if it's a Trinitarian, non-Trinitarian issue. Okay, Watchtower thinks you're an apostate. Or similar to it, but especially if you're an XJW and like you believe in the same God, same Messiah, same golden rule, but no 1914, yeah, you're as good as dead and never coming back. So what do we do with that? Well, probably we're not going to be able to do much. But as I was saying, that doesn't involve us. Other than to the extent that, we have to or become involved with people who are involved with that stuff, whether it's Trinitarian, Watchtower, other groups, right? Mormons, others, the same thing. No, some are more open to others in ways where it's not like, people are people, but the group, right? It's more often you're part of us or you're not, right? There's very rarely this acceptance across the board in spite of our differences. And I'm not saying that should always be the case, right? We've got some elements. And I think, Watchtower has some problematic elements, and so do Trinitarians, sufficient for us to say, wait a minute, no, I mean, it'd be nice, and we got some things that are close, but what's wrong with you guys, right? Why are you guys insisting on a new metaphysic for the one God of the Bible? Why are you making it multi-personal when he's unipersonal? Father. Why are you guys forcing people to believe that you were directly appointed by Jesus in 1919 or 1918, 1919 because of a chronology related to 1914 that isn't reliable, has basically been disproven, even if there are things that, again, with Watchtower, it's like with the whole prophet thing, right? You know, some of the criticisms against Watchtower's position, whether it's them also denying being prophets in spite of basically claiming to be prophets, but that's still different from a biblical false prophet. They don't ever deny being prophets. But, you know, it's not like we have extensive records. I'm just saying that's a difference. So I try to focus on false teachings. I had this conversation with someone recently. Why don't you call them false prophets? Well, because, you know, they deny being prophets, right? And in my case, my background researching these things, I found a lot of things these anti-Watchtower people wrote that were just wrong. Even though some of the things Watchtower wrote were very problematic and effectively claimed to be prophets, but again, with the denial, I don't think you can make the same argument. You know, there's a little bit of an out they made there where they can say, well, we're not, but we are. And either way, you can't get out of the false teachers, though, right? So this is what I mean about shortcuts. Why argue whether or not they're false prophets? Yes, it's a big deal. Yes, there's good evidence you can use to show that. But there's also this other thing that's complicating it. So why not just go for your false teachers? You've taught false things in God's name, and you still do. And some of the things you've taught in God's name, you said God would do. Like the generation that saw the events in 1914 would never not pass away until this generation, before this generation passed away, right? This generation that saw the events in 1914 won't pass away until all these things occur, according to the Creator's promise, right? Anyway, and in multiple issues and articles, Watchtower books. So we all know these things, okay? So they're at a minimum, they're false teachers. You're not supposed to talk about those things. You're not supposed to say God promises these things when he doesn't. You're not supposed to motivate people out of fear over things that he doesn't tell us to motivate them out of fear over. It's all false. It's all incorrect, right? They can't stop speculating over whether the people in Sodom and Gomorrah are going to be resurrected, right? Or Solomon. What the hell are you even talking about that stuff for? It's insanity. Because they know you guys are always in, you guys can't stop thinking about it. Who cares? The Watchtower, in one sense, they're just giving you guys what you want, a lot of you anyway. That's why I say, you know, while there's a lot of good people, let's see, is George here? We've got some people, and a lot of us come from that. We know they're good people. They're good in the sense that they're not practicing like overt badness. They may be misled. They may be ignoring things, but it's like with any other group. You got some people like the widow with two small coins that their heart's in the right place, but they may not be doing things structurally correct. Mostly because of the people running the show, right? The leaders. So I think often the Watchtower and even Trinitarian, they give you guys what you want. We blame them, and that's legitimate, I think, to a point. But what about all these people who keep listening to them? Yeah, it takes a while for some. There's different degrees of familiarity with issues or awareness, but that's only increasing the availability of information. It shows problematic areas that wouldn't then lead to this level of loyalty, right? But nonetheless, okay, so those are some of the things that they have to deal with. We know the Trinitarians, they got all this history they love to brag about. Well, it's pretty pathetic if you ask me. Yeah, some good things, we certainly hope so, but we're all still here, so the master's obviously looking for something. And the dragon's obviously corrupting things to try to prevent the type of things the master wants to obtain. So what do we do? Right? Mormons have their thing, right? There's no real like organized group that just stands out and has this innocent, undamaged history where there hasn't been something whacked out. I'm not talking about imperfect people. I'm talking about like just some unusual aspects to it. Usually something having to do with prophecy or extra biblical belief, right? Ontology, Trinity. Also money. Money blows a lot of groups up or corrupts them. You see that in the New Testament as well, right? Even Judas was the money changer. Money really destroys people. You got to be careful. I highly recommend you keep money out of your spiritual encounters. Unless it's absolutely necessary, right? Unless you have, not saying ignore people in need. We all know the accounts involving the Master and telling us about the Good Samaritan. Yeah, if you've got the things that are needed to help someone that you can see is clearly in need, they're not lying, they're not faking being a charity case or something, or that's totally different. That's what those accounts show. We help those people, but they don't become our responsibility forever. We help them. We help people, and then they're supposed to recover, get together, do what they're supposed to do. Now, when it comes to groups and how you organize things around the Bible, we're going to get some text in a moment, okay, and then we'll partake, wrap things up, about another hour or so. But watch out for money, okay? You really need to watch out for that. I would keep it, my opinion, based on the text we're going to read and have read and that are in there, keep it out of everything you do related to worshiping God the Father. Unless, again, you're doing an obvious charity like the Good Samaritan where someone is clearly in need and either you or others are working together to help that person. Not permanently, but because of the situation that you can clearly see came upon them. That's what that account shows. So you follow that, right? Or maybe there's something similar but different in a way that you're not going to be taken advantage of because someone isn't being responsible. Okay? You're not supposed to do that. You're only encouraging bad behavior when you do that. I know it's tempting, especially for people who try to be, caring, try to do good when you can, but it's you wonder at times, you got to, is it that? Or are you feeding a bad habit? Are you not helping someone, right? Do they lack faith? Is that the problem? Because money, the real problem with money, it doesn't involve faith. Well, faith in the government, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. Right? Money, whenever money is this world's means of transaction, right? Of course, we try to have faith, but we use it. But it really represents a non-Jah-centered way of transacting because the world isn't based on reciprocity in the good golden rule sense. We don't have that developed within us in a way that would make it possible. Ideally, yeah, it's the best. But it's not possible. That's why communism things don't work. They're ideals that are not possible without corruption or abuse. Far more so than the kind of more individualistic systems, at least seem to prevent more so, but none of them really do because they're based on money, right? They're not based on faith in God and they're not based on fear of God. They don't, usually people, they're not fearing God. They fear not having money, right? And that's how this world is. So to the extent we can, especially in our worship, keep the money out of it. And that's why these texts we're going to read right now, I think show very clearly that in the New Testament, right, the way they met together and the way they did their congregating as Christians and looked after each other and ministered to others, right? Of course, again, we have the apostles there, so it's a little different. They're performing miracles. They're redistributing the money that people are putting at their feet. Again, so unless you're willing to follow it like that, I'm not here to tell you not follow it, but that is with the Holy Spirit present in an unusually, supportive way that would help alleviate a lot of corruption, which I don't think we could confidently have right now, at least. And either way, that model requires a redistribution of that money to people as they need it, not for the people who are collecting the money to keep it and keep doing what they want to with it, which is what happens. And of course, it's a different culture and time and way of living. But maybe some societies would still be similar, or it could be done nonetheless if you didn't have these other problems, right? Redistribution issues, corruption. So we follow these models to the extent that they make sense or are applicable to what we're actually capable of today or dealing with, right? Doing. And so how does that work? How does that work for Christians today? How do we confidently, outside of these, online gatherings and discussions and doing what we can online, emails, stuff like that, how can we do it more local? How can we do it so it's more personal? Like these other groups, these bigger groups, right? They've been around longer. They're more appealing in the money and association aspects because of they're having more people that can meet more locally as groups. But they all started out that same way, right? Even if you go back, even if you say the Catholics, right? Before that, the Christians, having been banned all the way through the early centuries, had to meet privately. And based on the records we have, they met in homes, not just in the New Testament, but afterwards, until the Edict of Milan was lifted, or the edict prohibiting Christians was lifted, again with Constantine, 4th century. So now there were some changes as well before that, but not to the extent that they were, and allowed them to meet in these public church buildings. So I don't think there's really any dispute. We do have accounts, we're going to read some right now. We have accounts where they do meet, obviously, in the temple, in the synagogue, and they go out into areas, the Areopagus and elsewhere, where other religions have people who are, promoting their doctrine or living according to their faiths. So the Christians would go in and witness to them. All these things were taking place in ways that had to do with the development, the spread of Christianity among the Jews and Gentiles that allowed it to become what it is now. Something that will be here all the way to the end, so that the ones the Master wants to hear it and who hear him will find him. Now, let's take a look at the New Testament. Let's see what's going on there. But basically, they're meeting in homes, New Testament period and thereafter, if they have them, right? Many times, especially with people like Paul, they didn't. But they could go to people's homes, and you'll see the congregation even of that home. Let me just say hi to everybody, and then we'll bring up the text, okay? So I'll bring these up here. I'm going to put these in a different font, though. Got a list. I'm just going to read this list here. I think it will be better than going the Bible. These aren't really disputable in terms of, there's 10 separate texts we're going to look at. They're not really disputable or dependent upon us getting into the grammar and the semantics of the term in their original language. Of course, I'm not saying that can't be done in ways that would be more enlightening, but for the most part, they're exactly as we're going to read them. And so I'm just going to bring that up. Try to make it a little bit bigger. I'll bring you guys up first. We say hi to everyone. Miro, George, Betsy, and T Clan. I said hi to a lot of you earlier on as we start going. Thank you for joining me again. I'll be off for a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. Once we get into August, first, second week, I'll be back Thursday or Saturday probably. But be looking at the notices. AK, 2 a.m. in the UK. Probably around 2:30 now, right? Good to have you. Hopefully I'm giving you some good information for your being awake so early or late, depending on how you see it. Exile reviews, very good. And Bankhead, nice. Cypher Gray says he wishes he knew more personally. Well, you will. There's only one way. Just keep learning, keep listening. Hopefully the videos and things will help, give you more concentrated bursts of learning. So you get to kind of benefit from other people, in this case me, who hopefully can put some things that would take you longer to read on your own into more concise summaries or applications that will give you that advantage. That's what it's all about. Helping people, right? So you see what you need to see so you can praise Jah or not, right? That's up to you. My job is to help you see what I see and let you choose. They discovered a new place in Peru, I know. You're talking about the one with the bird statues, I think. If you're talking about the one, I think, T-Clan, they showed these incredible, wavy bird figures, like we see elsewhere too, right? It's like these bird figures showing up all around the world. And of course, we have well-known bird-like figures in the Bible, don't we? I'm not saying they're exactly the same in all those ways, but certainly in terms of what they might be manifesting as or capable of. Oh yeah, there have been a lot of things actually. They found a Stonehenge. They found this actually a while ago, but they've verified it, I think, more recently. A Stonehenge circle with these stones and pillars like at Stonehenge at the bottom of Lake Michigan in the United States. I think it's next to a boulder that has a carving of a mastodon on it. And it's at the bottom. So again, there has been, in my opinion, a worldwide flooding of the earth. There's sufficient water above, on, and below to account for it. All the ancient records say it happened, or many credible ones. And the evidence is overwhelming, right? We've got places that clearly weren't built this deep underwater, whether it's the ocean or these Great Lakes. So what happened? Well, according to all the available evidence, Jah destroyed the world because it was fully perved out, okay? So we know what can happen, and it's a good thing, right? He didn't make the earth and give us all these things so we could destroy it and make it a disgrace. Yeah, we're in a condition where we do things that make us, but he's right. We shouldn't be allowed to perv out. We can all see what that leads to, can we not? Fully gone, right? I mean, there'll be no end to the perv if he didn't stop it. All these people. Okay, good. QRPNXZ, good to see you. I'm trying not to miss anybody, and there's a lot of people are pumped up. Freddie Churro, he looks pumped up. And Everett, 13 above. Okay, good. Let's take a look at a few texts, right? We won't spend what time is it? 7? So we've been about an hour. We'll spend at most probably an hour more. We're going to read about 10 accounts, not big, long ones, a couple little bigger than the others, but I have all the verses right here. Copied them down. I think doing the split screen might be best here. So let's see. Don't worry, once I get it set, I'll make it a little bigger, and then we'll get right to these texts. You're going to love these. Some of them you probably already know, but some, even if you know, maybe you didn't think about them the way I'm going to apply them. So we'll see if you agree and think I got it right, or can appreciate whatever point is possible from what we have. Bigger. Might be too big there. Let's see. Oh, no, that's good. All right, let's keep it like that. And, okay, so I just separate them that way here. Just each one we do to mark them that way. Maybe I'll go ahead and make those bold. That should make them a little better to read, I guess. Yeah. They look okay. All right. So let's read this account from Matthew 10. Excuse me. All right, Matthew 10. We're going to read verses 11. This is the NWT. Again, I don't think there are any issues. And if there are, and you like NWT, well, that's your issue. Unless you have a legitimate point you're prepared to make and that we should consider because we're going to make a mistake, save it. Read it in your version. Here's what it says, NWT, verse 11, Matthew 10, the Master, talking to his followers. Into whatever city or village you enter, search out who in it is deserving, and stay there until you leave. Verse 12, when you are entering into the house, greet the household. Verse 13, and if the house is deserving, let the peace you wish it come upon it. But if it is not deserving, let the peace from you return upon you. Verse 14, whenever anyone does not take you in or listen to your words, on going out of that house or that city, shake the dust off your feet. Okay, so we see obviously the Master sending the disciples to cities and villages. The question is, are they like going door to door, like Watchtower does, or even like Mormons or other groups? Excuse me. It doesn't say that. It just says when they're entering the house, right? It's possible, but it's like with Jesus in the New Testament and all these accounts, when people wanted to talk to you or have dinner with you, they would invite you to their house. Very common, especially in the ancient world, right? Maybe not so common today in certain places. But the fact that they're going into someone's house would not make it a required understanding that the disciples were going door to door. Not even close. Because, again, it was customary, commonplace, illustrated throughout the New Testament, in Acts and with Jesus in the Gospels, that they would take them into their homes. This happens all over the place. We're going to see it in the rest of our text. Nevertheless, he is sending them into the city and village and to the people in their homes, right? So it's not like, I guess you could say by some extension that this city or village, it has synagogues, it has public places. It kind of narrows it down to this, though. But just like I wouldn't say that's limited to house, or more likely, in my view, and according to the Bible, customary invitation for either dinner or discussion, and could spend several days, right? Search out who is deserving. Right? So you're going to go in there, and you're going to find out who is deserving, and stay there until you leave. Okay. Because there's sometimes when they get a lot of resistance, like in the book of Acts, we may or may not look at an account of it, where Paul says he gets a lot of resistance. And he's like, okay, I'm out of here. And you guys you're going to want to listen. The nations will listen. So this part here, though, I think probably we forget that a lot. At least I do. I just sometimes, I try to more now, but maybe it in the past was a little more tempting just to start talking whoever seemed interested or had an interest, right? Even if they wanted to argue. whereas now I'm more selective. I think that's very important. Maybe I'll change that to a little dark blue there. Make it stand out a little different. Can you see it? That's not so viewable though, huh? We'll just change it back. We'll just do that. We'll give it like its own special. That doesn't make it stand out, huh? We'll just turn it back to red. That does make it stand out. Okay. Let's move on. So I think we got some good information from that account. Second account. Luke 9, starting verse 1. Then he, that is Jesus, called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all the demons and to cure sicknesses. Verse 2, so he sent them forth to preach the kingdom of God and to heal. Verse 3, and he said to them, carry nothing for the trip, neither staff, nor food pouch, nor bread, nor silver money, neither have two undergarments. Verse 4, but wherever you enter into a home, stay there, and then leave from there. Verse 5, and whenever people do not receive you, on going out of that city, shake the dust off your feet for a witness against them. Okay, so very similar to what we read in Matthew. Right? As you can see, culturally, it's a different place and time, and things are done in ways that may not be as practical for us, right? That we look at and think, well, why would he tell them that? As I mentioned, the degrees of hospitality and what is customary during these times and in these cultures and places not only allowed for this to be possible, but also allowed for Jesus to have them show their faith in him and for them to rely on what he was telling them to do. They understood that if they proceeded, that these things were a part of their culture in ways that if what he was saying was true and they believed, then that wouldn't be so far gone, from the kind of, again, greeting and hospitality you could receive, especially when you're going there to do these things. You're not going there to just freeload, perv out, right? You're there to actually help people. Okay? And that's what they did. So these people weren't just supporting the disciples who came to encourage them. No, they actually did some very significant things. And that's why Jesus said, if they're not going to accept you, and you have the ability to do this, and you're doing this, well, then just forget them, right? Shake the dust off your feet and take off. Stay there until you leave. Like Paul said, you guys are crazy. I'm going to the nations. They'll listen to me. Okay. Number 3. A little out of alignment there. Looks good. Okay. Our third account, we're going to read just a few texts. Acts chapter 5, just 2 verses here. Right here at the top. We'll do that in a minute. These therefore went their way from before the Sanhedrin, talking about the apostles, rejoicing because they had been counted worthy to be dishonored on behalf of his name. Talking about Jesus' name. Verse 42, and every day in the temple and from house to house, it's NWT, they continued without let up, teaching and declaring the good news about the Christ Jesus. Okay, so right here, this is the key part. Once they got released, they then every day in the temple and from house to house. Okay? So that part right there Watchtower people use often this from house to house, right? And of course, I'm not saying, I don't think it was really something that they did the way it's done today, but maybe Watchtower saying, well, we do it this way today. And so they did it a little bit differently. Okay, fine. That's possible. But it's also possible that these references to homes had to do with either meeting people and then being invited to their home as something that very customarily was done so that they could discuss things, or they didn't have TVs. They didn't have other things that could distract them and soak up their time like it does today, right? No, they actually had a lot of time for this stuff. This is a big part of the culture of these times, and in even cultures today. But it's hard, I think, for us, many of us, especially in developed countries, who have so many distractions. We think, it's hard to picture, like, just spending all day and several days at someone's house and it really being okay, and they're like happy to have you there, very happy that you're there to talk about the Bible, their sacred texts, right, and to show their hospitality, right? Yeah, I think a lot of Westerners they're not familiar with that. It is more commonplace in Middle Eastern countries and areas where hospitality is much more exercised and open. But it's kind of gotten lost on a lot of developed countries because of all the distractions, I think. So people don't know how to deal with each other anymore. They don't know how to spend time with each other anymore. So, going house to house, when it's talking about this in the New Testament time, it's talking about spending all day, unless they kick you out, right? Like we read earlier from the Master. He said, you go in there, you find out who's deserving, and then you stay there. And if they don't want to have you in their home, well, then forget it. So that he's not talking about just, again, maybe Watchtower can look at it differently today. I'm not saying this invalidates Watchtower's interpretation, but I just don't think it's such an obvious parallel with the events in the New Testament or the culture of the times and the way that if they were going to invite you into their home, that was like, especially remember, they were going there to spend a lot of time there if they were invited. So I definitely see there's a difference, right? They're definitely in people's homes. They're in the temple. They're in the synagogue, as you'll see, and as we all know. So it's not just one place. It's everywhere. But the homes are definitely involved. Again, I don't see any evidence that Christians met outside of homes in the structural church building way until, Constantine. Time of Constantine, 4th century. Again, I'm not saying it never happened in ways that would be a little bit different, but for the most part, they met in homes in the New Testament and for a long time thereafter. Let's get our next account. Also in Acts chapter 8. Thank you all for joining me. Let me just take a quick look. So everyone's doing. Make sure there's no perv out. Never know, right? Can happen. Yes, good text. QRPNXZ. One, I didn't read part of it. He quoted part of, "Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment." They don't listen to you, right? So you definitely want to try to ignore that. That looks like we got Ron Rogan and Czar to join us. Okay, very good. You guys are all pumped up. Let's get back to it. All right, so Acts chapter 8. All right, so let's focus here. We want to try to learn from how the early Christians, who often didn't even have homes of their own, they've had very few people comparatively to many Christian groups today. So they're more similar to us in some way. And we want to follow the Bible and it's in the original text anyway, right? So it applies to us, I think, as a more developing small group like they were, more than any of these groups, especially since given our commitment to these texts and trying to just, not allow traditions and our own perved out understanding get in the way. Acts 8, verse 1. Saul, for his part, right, when he was perving out, was approving of the murder of him, talking about Stephen in Acts 7. This right after that. On that day, great persecution arose against the congregation that was in Jerusalem. All except the apostles scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria. Okay, there's a lot here, huh? So great persecution arose against the congregation of Christians, the gathered Christians in Jerusalem. Okay, what does that mean? They were in Jerusalem. Where were they in Jerusalem? Well, obviously they were in their own homes or living with each other in some way. Right? The synagogues were for the Jews, but they still attended those because of their being related to them and Jewish, and they're wanting to convert as many Jews as part of their Christianity. And so it was a very fertile ground for them in that way. But they didn't have like their own synagogue, right? These were the synagogues of the Jews they would go into. So they were in Jerusalem, I guess, in their own homes, but where they would also meet in different homes or in the synagogue or in the temple. And then after this great persecution, after Stephen was killed and Saul's going crazy, everyone takes off except the apostles. They all get scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Verse 2 says, reverent men carried Stephen to the burial. Right, so strong, courageous people stood around, or maybe just reverent people of the Jews, it doesn't say. And they made a great lamentation over him. But Saul, verse 3, began to deal outrageously with the congregation. Okay, now how does he do this? This is very important. Saul began to deal outrageously with the congregation. Now we know right here, right? The congregation is in Jerusalem. That's where they are. And this persecution's happening. It's scattering everybody except the apostles. So reverend men are taking care of Stephen after he was killed. Saul starts to go and attack the congregation. How does he do that? Well, look what it says, the end of verse 3. Invading one house after another. They were in houses, like we were speculating about up here before we could see it explicitly right here. He went after them in their houses. See, they didn't have any other kind of meeting place. I guess, I'm not going to say there's no place they ever met. Again, we also know they had the temple, the synagogues, not like they didn't meet anywhere outside their home. But when he wanted to find them, that's where he went, invading one house after another. Doesn't say he went anywhere else. Dragging out both men and women. He would turn them over to prison. So we want to make sure this highlighted, right? That's a big deal. Invading one house after another. How can we make that even bigger? We'll blue that. That's a good one. I think right there tells us what this is, okay? This congregation. This here. Well, maybe I should, let me see. I guess I'll leave that yellow. But I think I'll make the word congregation blue only. And I'll make this yellow to match. There we go. This right here, I think, is this house, one house after another. That is the congregation in Jerusalem. The group of Christians. Verse 4, however, those who had been scattered, remember we read about those right here, went through the land declaring the good news of the word. All right, so I think that shows very clearly they were meeting in homes, or the congregation was in the homes, wherever the Christians actually lived and or met in homes. Excuse me. Acts 12:11. Peter, coming to himself, said, oh, let me make that bold. It's one of our kind of longer ones, but not like super long. And Peter, coming to himself, said, now I actually know that Jehovah sent his angel forth and delivered me out of Herod's hand and from all that the people of the Jews were expecting. Now, I believe this is an inappropriate use of Jehovah in the New Testament by the NWT. That's what I was mentioning earlier. It's a place where they went too far. This is an example of interpretive bias, or I guess one of the best examples, not John 1:1, not these other theologically correctly translated texts, but something like this, which isn't a correct translation of the term used, whether Lord or God, because it's not what that means. It can stand for it, but that's not standing for it in a quote, or even in a significant paraphrase where it's almost a quote, but it's more borrowing the language and apart from an application of someone like Jesus, which happens. It's neither one of those. Right? This is an example of, like I give in my Jehovah's Witnesses Defended chapter on the divine name. No, that should not have happened, okay? There's no basis for the divine name there. And so we call things out, good and bad with the NWT. Fortunately, there's a lot more good than bad. But Watchtower people, you should know not only the good, but the bad. So Peter's reflecting on what happened with him and Herod and being in prison. Verse 12 says, after he considered it, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was surnamed Mark, where quite a few were gathered together and praying. Where'd he go? He went to the house of Mary. Oh, yeah. That looks like a congregation to me. Doesn't it to you? A group of Christians gathering in a home, just like Saul was trying to find when he was going after the congregation in Jerusalem. Verse 13, when he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhoda came to attend the call. And upon recognizing the voice of Peter, out of joy, she did not open the gate, but ran inside and reported that Peter was standing before the gateway. Verse 15, then they said to her, you were mad. She kept on strongly asserting it was so. They began to say, it's his angel. Peter remained there knocking. When they opened, they saw him and were astonished. Verse 17, but he motioned to them with his hand to be silent and told them in detail how Jehovah, once again, no basis for that use of the divine name there, how the Lord probably brought him out of the prison and said, report these things to James and the brothers. With that, he went out and journeyed to another place. Right? So he knew when Peter got released, he knew where to go to find them, didn't he? He went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, where quite a few were what? Gathered together and praying. I think a lot of us wonder what we do. What should we do when we meet together? Well, you know what we do when we meet, and we pray in our own way, but not publicly because we're told not to do that, right? But when you're privately meeting, maybe that's something you should do more of. I know it's hard for people, especially, non-watch or former Watchtower people and that, because it's just something, they don't do it the same way. They kind of open and close with prayer. It's a little different. Do it however you feel comfortable, right? Pray for people, pray for things to happen. Try not to be a spectacle, just be normal people who are trying to invoke the Father through the Son and pray for the Holy Spirit to help us and those for whom we pray. It doesn't need to be a big spectacle. It just needs to be people gathered together asking for the same things. What did the Master say? 2 or more are gathered together in my name, there I am. 2 or more of you agree on anything, it shall be done. Right? That's a big deal. Instead, we often get together and we argue about things. We don't ask for things. We don't ask for things by praying together in a reasonable manner, showing faith in the Master that if we ask for these things, we're going to have them. Good things, right? Like, stop the perv. We agree, Master, please. We've been, dealing with a massive Jezebel perv out. So if you could threaten her with a spiritual knockout, like you did in Revelation, that would be great. We all want to see that happen. We agree and pray for the same thing. Then we'll see a drop in the perv, right? They'll get blown out, right? In a spiritual sense, like they blow each other out in a physical sense. Oh, man. All right, let's keep going. Let's finish this up. We're on number 6. That's good stuff, right? You see what I'm seeing, right? This is the main part here. This is a good part too, but this is really the key part. This is what he tells them to do later. That's probably not necessary to highlight because it's not explicitly related to our main point, which is how are these early Christians meeting together with so few people comparatively to the Jews and others, and how should we do it, therefore? How can we be effective? Right? Do we need to have a lot of people, or can we just meet in homes with a few people, and what do? Well, we know we can pray. We know we can meet together and pray, encourage each other. Maybe share a text, right? Maybe progressively read through something briefly. I don't always think it has to be something so extended, though, Maybe you have more time, right? We can't always say. I'm thinking also more in a Western sense of, are you someone who's just able to meet someone for coffee or something for a half hour to an hour someplace, or is that something you already do? And maybe to add to what you do, you just read a proverb. Maybe one day one of you picks one, the other day the other one picks one, and you just read it. No one has to really get into some deep, analysis unless it's appropriate, but I think sometimes just reading it and then resuming your discussion and talking about life and the things you came to talk about and encourage each other, the proverb will apply somewhere and you'll be able to say, hey, that fits what we read there. Try to think more just simply in that way. Things that already fit in with the things you're doing each day or regularly with people in ways where you wouldn't have to do much different. Maybe just add, like I said, I'll read one, everyone, you involve people. Hey, you pick a proverb, just share it and we'll try to gain some wisdom. Pick a saying of Jesus, right? Pick something that we can just have lingering over our coffee break or tea time or whatever. And whether it directly applies or not, we considered something together. If you've got bread and wine as Christians, well, then go ahead and share it. If you don't have that, it's not convenient. Well, when it is, then add that. All right. Let's read Acts 20. It's probably our longest one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Got some good stuff here. We're not too far from being done. We got some good stuff here, so let's check it out. Verse 17. However, from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called for the older men of the congregation. When they got to him, he said to them, you well know how from the first day I stepped into the district of Asia, I was with you the whole time, slaving for the Lord with the greatest lowliness of mind, and tears and trials that befell me by the plots of the Jews. Well, I did not hold back from telling you any of the things that were profitable, nor from teaching you publicly and from house to house. Right, so what does that mean? From house to house. Well, we've already kind of talked about how no one's saying this can't be anything like what Watchtower's doing. It's not as culturally equivalent to that, but it's more common and customary for them to have been invited in for a longer period of time in ways that would have been not just to educate about the Bible, but to actually do either something supernatural in the case of the disciples, or here teaching, right, in extended ways that involve a thorough witness to build up their faith in Jesus and repentance toward God. Now, we read earlier, right, how Saul knew exactly where to go to get the Christians, the congregation in Jerusalem. He started going every house he knew they would be in. Now, we know he wasn't preaching the good news, right? So certainly they could have, but it seems more likely to me that they were going from each other's houses who either they were already believers or the people they would meet, and that would invite them to come and talk to them and to have fellowship for however long it was, or until they asked them to leave, or they were a believer. So that fits to me not only culturally, how the customary hospitality fits more with them being invited for extended periods of time, and also what Jesus said, right? Don't go from house to house, stay there, right? And do these things unless they kicked you out, right? So Watchtower people could say, well, we stay in there too. And again, I'm not saying this is an invalidation of everything Watchtower uses from these texts. I don't think they're the exact same or as equivalent as Watchtower does, or necessary, right? Or you're out. You're considered weak if you don't go door to door. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about whether or not you were teaching people repentance of God and faith in Jesus, right? Things that are profitable. Teaching them publicly, house to house, right? In their homes, in the temple, in the synagogues. Look, bound in the Spirit. And now, look, bound in the Spirit, I'm journeying to Jerusalem, although not knowing the things that will happen to me in it, except that from city to city, the Holy Spirit repeatedly bears witness to me, as it says that bonds and tribulations are waiting for me. Verse 24, nevertheless, I do not make my soul of any account as dear to me, if only I may finish my course in the ministry that I received of the Lord Jesus, to bear thorough witness to the good news of the undeserved kindness of God. And look, I know that all of you among whom I went preaching the kingdom will see my face no more. Hence I call you to witness this very day that I'm clean from the blood of all men. For I have not held back telling you all the counsel of God. Pay attention to yourselves and to all the flock among whom the Holy Spirit has appointed you overseers, to shepherd the congregation of God, which he purchased with the blood of his own Son. I have written about that in my books. I believe that is correct. I'm not going to get off on it right now. Verse 29, I know that after my going away, this is the key part for our discussion, just giving context, leading up to it. I know that after my going away, oppressive wolves will enter among you and not treat the flock with tenderness. Okay, so we got to be careful here. If they had to be careful, and he's telling us to be careful, we got to be careful. We can't just start congregating, right? There's got to be some responsibility attached to this that each of us must accept for our own congregation. From among you yourselves men will rise and speak twisted things, perverted things, to draw away the disciples after themselves. Verse 31, therefore keep awake and bear in mind that for 3 years, day and night, I did not quit admonishing each one with tears, right? So he was there when he's talking about in homes. What was that? It was earlier up here. Verse 20, publicly and house to house. He's talking, I didn't hold back from telling you any things that were profitable. Publicly, house to house. right? He didn't just go there. He did it for a long period of time, right? What does he say right here? For 3.5 years. I'm sorry, 3 years. Day and night. He didn't quit admonishing each one with tears. All right, these are extended visits, right? Where he's spending a lot of time with these people because of the not only the culture and the nature of accepting people like it was, but also the message and the way that the Jews expressed so much faith in these things that it made it even more so something they all wanted, until they, of course, if they didn't. But if they did, this was how it is. Right? They were very involved and stayed that way for a long time. Verse 32, and now I commit you to God and to the word of his undeserved kindness, which word can build you up and give you the inheritance among all the sanctified ones. Right there. I commit you to God and to the word of his undeserved kindness. It sounded like he wanted them to do everything he said and only what he said. No. I have coveted no man's silver or gold or apparel. You yourselves know that these hands have attended to the needs of me. He's talking about his own hands. And those with me. So they didn't freeload. They did work, right? These were real men and women. Right? They took their life seriously. They took their responsibility seriously. They looked after themselves, right? It's not like they never did. We know Paul accepted gifts and they started to look after him because of look at all he did. And he did everything he could to continue not to depend on other people. It just became a situation where sometimes people want to, right? We see that even here. But I don't ask for it. I don't look for it. I say the same thing he does. I exhibited to you in all things that by thus laboring you must assist those who are weak. Okay. That's a big deal, right? This is their congregation. He's talking to the people he was with for 3.5 years in their homes and in public, teaching them with tears. Must bear in mind the words of the Lord Jesus. That's a big one. What specifically? There's more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. And that's true. Unless you're dealing with a pervert or someone who's not genuine like you need to be careful, okay? We have a lot of liars today. They pretend to be these things. But they're really the only ones receiving. And you're and me really the only ones giving. That's not how it was with the apostles. That's not how it was with Jesus. So if you're the only one acting like the apostles and like Jesus, who are they acting like? Right? All right, we're getting close here with number 7. Okay, I got 10 of them. Don't forget the weak. Who's weak? People who don't have faith. They're not sure what to believe yet. They're confused. That can happen a lot more easily today with how weak everybody is and the way the world is so pathetic. All the garbage, right? The repetition of lies. Help those who are weak. You're not going to do that by continuously arguing, because then they're going to believe that there's something no one can ever agree on. You're going to do that by pointing out things that are absolutely agreeable on, even if you don't know 100%, right? Remember what we talked about? Do you know if you're going to get injured when you go out and drive today or tomorrow? No, you're going to do it anyway, though, right? So it's not about knowing 100%, not even where your life is concerned. Just give people the best available evidence. They can figure it out. But many people don't even have the evidence they need to be anything but weak. All right, so we can help out. We got a couple of smaller ones here. Let's just go through them here. Romans 16:3 through 5. We're looking at the early Christians. We're trying to see how we can be like them and survive spiritually, in addition to our online meetings and the technological ways we can meet together today. How can we do this in a smaller community? How can we do this with at least one other person? That's all we need. Jesus said 2 or more gather. That's all you need. He frequently uses 2 in Sandbox 2. We only need 2. Don't worry, Sam. I forgive you, I guess. But it's really a question whether the master does. So don't mock that number. It's a big number. because he's present, right? So you got to look at it that way. We're not supposed to have always these big, how many think we're in Mary's house? Mother of James, surname Mark. Probably, 5 to 10? I'm on an optimistic level. I doubt it was so packed that they were lowering people through the roof like when Jesus was there. Right? So let's not make this so unachievable that we just defeat ourselves mentally because we think it's more than we can handle. No, it's quite handleable. In fact, part of our problem, I think, is we've been fooled. We've been fooled into thinking we need to be something more than we are or can be. And then we see other people doing it, right? We see these bigger groups, bigger religions, bigger buildings, bigger meetings. Are you reading that here? Is that what you're seeing here in these texts, that they had all these buildings and then they met in them and they didn't meet in homes? No, I'm not seeing that at all. Again, I'm not saying if you religions, well, you guys go for it. I don't think it's a good idea, quite honestly. I don't see the benefit in putting that much money. I think, if anything, Watchtower probably has a right in keeping it modest, but I'm not saying they don't have their ulterior motives on some property values level. My point is, I don't think, Christians do themselves any favors like Mormons and Catholics. They get very opulent and extravagant, right? They love idols. I don't see that reflects the Master's teaching or the New Testament Christians. It seems to be more extravagant. You could use that money to feed the poor. Think of all the money you have to pour into these material things as churches and groups, pay taxes and the rent and all these things. You're paying all that to keep the electricity, the utilities. Hey, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I think we can use that money to help keep ourselves alive in this world and help other people, don't you? Definitely, right? So why incur this unnecessary burden of trying to identify ourselves publicly with a commercial building when everything in the New Testament that we've read so far, and we're going to keep reading, tells us they were meeting in homes and talking publicly, but they didn't have this big, expensive building or place where they had to upkeep and people had to contribute and donate ways where if they didn't, well, the lights are turned off. We don't have a church and now we can't. What are we going to do? No, this is what we do. And we can use that to our advantage to help people versus enrich certain people who own that property and or who otherwise benefit. Hey, if you can work something out where that's not the case, good for you. I think money complicates things. I think the more you try to create a system that requires monetary contribution outside of helping people in obvious need, like the Good Samaritan, and or redistributing it equally according to need, like the apostles did, which I doubt anyone could do today, unless you're really together for a long period of time, you develop the faith necessary. So start somewhere. Before you just start out at the level of the apostles, right, and think you can be as good as them and redistributing everything equally. Yeah, maybe just take care of yourself like Paul did and help those in need. And when you become in need, if you need some help, well, people will help you. That's how reciprocity works. 1 Corinthians 11:33, consequently, my brothers. A little bold right there. When you come together to eat it, talking about the eating meal, we're going to have that in a moment. I got it right here. So you can see it. Get the one. Consequently, my brothers, when you come together to eat it, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, eat at home, right? That's why sometimes I'll eat like before. I'm hungry. I know. See, you got me thinking now. I got myself thinking. Oh, the Bible. I'm at home. And we're waiting. It says right there, if anyone's hungry, let him eat at home. Right there. That you may not come together for judgment. Right, where we start abusing the emblems and or not honoring them in the right way. But the remaining matters I will set in order when I get there. All right. So I think this also shows, though, right? So if he's saying, look, if you're hungry, eat at home. So obviously they were going somewhere. They're going to someone's home. When you come together, there's no indication they were meeting anywhere, unless it was a public place, maybe. But then they'd be out in the open, right? So unless they were going somewhere public, like the synagogue, I think, he's telling them, look, eat at home if you're that hungry before you go to someone else's home to partake of the emblems together. This is when you're coming together, right? When you come together, wait for one another, right? Because you're coming together. Why? You're coming together to partake of the bread and the wine. That's the whole point. It's what binds us together, our faith in the Master returning and what he did. So rather than start partaking prematurely before everyone gets there that's coming, eat before you have to do that. Or in my case, I'm already here, right? I'm at home. So I think that's very clear. They do come together away from their own home if it's not in their home. But as we've seen, they are meeting in homes. It's just obviously some people have to leave their home and go to the home where they're meeting. Like the people who were at the house of Mary. Okay, we're almost done. Colossians 4:15 and 16. Thank you for joining me. We're looking at accounts in the Bible that have to do with how the early Christians met, studied, fellowship together, so that as a growing group of Christians who are meeting together through the internet in other ways, can also do so in the more fundamental, personal ways. If you just have one other person, right, you can do so many things. Like we read about in Pliny's letter to Trajan, right? Come together, even maybe some of you work at the same place, or you do a ride share and you ride together and work or something. Well, maybe you can, we're talking like 5, 10, 15 minutes. And you can always make it longer if it's more comfortable for you. But if you only have a few minutes before you have to go to work, but you're together, why not take a moment? And if you don't have the emblems, then at least like the Christians that Pliny wrote about, you can say a prayer, agree not to lie, cheat, steal, or share a proverb, share a saying of Jesus, a text from the Bible. This can be very quick and brief, but that binds you together in a spiritual way that maintains your fellowship. Other people will see you do it. Hey, I want to do that too. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Now you got 3 people. Now you got 4, and those people are telling more. You see how fast this can happen? And believe me, you need to be prepared, because it's not always a great thing. It can be. But remember, you got to keep it pure. Even if you meet together in ways where it don't involve like money and stuff, and it's very innocent like this, other people might start to see it as an opportunity. Oh, I'll offer this to these people and, make a lot of money. That's not what this is about, right? Do you see any indication that we're supposed to use our coming together for those reasons? Yeah, if you can help people like Good Samaritan or otherwise, that's fine. No one should feel like they're being taken advantage of. No one should require others to provide money for anything unless it's something that the person chooses to do for a reason that is solely their option. Very important, I think. And not having these public buildings and having all this cost, I think, not only benefited the Christians, might have been a little different, of course, in terms of utilities and that, but for us, it's a big deal, right? Yeah, so we may forego this whole, structural representation, but that's not what we're told to do. That's not what we're showed we should do, and it's not even really very practical. I think it only fits really those who, it's more than just the religious things, right? There's more a financial involvement, whether they think it's appropriate or not. And then just, maybe certain communities are just structured that way where it's better to have a facility in some sense. Again, so I'm not trying to make a standard where it's like you could never do this or anything. I'm just looking at the Bible. Okay, and I'm saying, okay, this all makes sense and seems to be the most practical way to manage the people you do or don't want to be around or in your home, right? And you still have to actively deal with that. But of question is, what are you willing to permit? This is up to you in terms of what home you'll go to, what home or people you'll have in your home to talk about these things. I recommend you keep it very small, especially at first, until you get to know people and at least see what's going on. Who are you dealing with? You know how easy it is for people to pretend to be religious and to undermine what you're doing or just not care? Very easily. So no one says you have to have these kind of associations with everybody. Remember what it said earlier? Seek out those deserving. And that's what the master said. Whenever you go into a village or city, seek out those deserving and stay with them. Right. So don't just be so quick, because someone, it's tempting, especially when we're like looking for people we can do more stuff with, right? But what did he say? Find who's deserving. He didn't say just find everyone who seems interested, go spend time with them. No. Find out who's deserving. And look at this, Colossians 4:15-16. Paul says, give my greetings to the brothers at Laodicea and to Nympha and to the congregation at her house. Right? Right there. You see a house congregation, a gathering of Christians, a congregation at her house. Nympha. So I think that's pretty explicit that Christians were gathering together at other Christians' homes. Verse 16, and when this letter has been read among you, right? Reading, this is what he's talking about. Give my greetings to the brothers at Laodicea and to Nympha and the congregation at her house. So there's probably other brothers in other areas of Laodicea, but there was a congregation at her house that the letter would be read among. And they were going to arrange also for it to be read in the congregation of the Laodiceans, and that you also read the one from Laodicea. Right here. Probably this I interpret or understand to be all of these. Right? So you have brothers at Laodicea, and you have a congregation at Nympha's house. So these brothers are probably at other people's houses. And all of them, all the Christians that meet at these different homes are the congregation of the Laodiceans. It seems to me pretty clearly that that's what it's talking about. So you could be referred to similarly. Right? The congregation, it would develop over time, but the congregation of Southern California, the congregation of, I don't want to say like a whole state necessarily, but it could be, right? And then it gets further broken down based on region or even city if it becomes that necessary to differentiate from other groups. But that's basically how it is working in the first century in the Bible. Okay. Titus 1:14, we're on second to last text. Oh, sorry. Let me just make sure there's no perv out. That can happen. Gotta be vigilant. We gotta watch things. See what's happening here. Excuse me. Very nice. Looks like you guys are having a good time. Betsy and Ron are going a little bit on fire right there. Okay, Titus 1:10-14. For there are many unruly men, profitless talkers, deceivers of the mind. Sam, especially those men who adhere to the circumcision. Verse 11, it is necessary to shut the mouths of these, as these very men keep on subverting entire households by teaching things they ought not, for the sake of dishonest gain. You know, when I read this, it seemed to me like he's talking again about congregation households of Christians that meet together where people like this teach others things that are wrong. Seems like to me that's what he's saying, right? You got to watch out for these people. They're perverts. They're teaching things to households, entire households. I guess maybe it's just the household of people who are the relatives that live in that house, but doesn't seem any reason to limit it to that, especially given how we have references already, like we read, to congregation households. The congregation in Mary's house, congregation in Nympha's house, congregations of Laodicea. We got these people perving out, misleading households. Seems like to me that's like Paul was teaching, taught them day and night with tears in homes, as I understood those texts, like we talked about it. Well, unlike Paul, these people are perving out in front of entire households and by teaching the congregations incorrect things. That's how I understand it. I think it's a likely interpretation. Verse 12, a certain one of them, their own prophet, said, Cretans are always liars, injurious wild beasts, unemployed gluttons. Verse 13, this witness is true. For this very cause, keep on reproving them with severity, that they may be healthy in the faith. Right? So, if you've got people in your home like these perverts, then you are responsible for shutting their mouth. I'm not talking physically. This is the way the Bible speaks when it's spiritually referring to how we deal with people. Right? We got to stop them from doing this stuff right here. This deception, this unruliness, this ridiculousness. There's no value what they're talking about. It's just wasting our time, basically, right? With whatever it is this would represent. Subverting people for dishonest gain. Right? Remember I talked about that? Money. Oh, yeah. They got to be reproved, right? You shut the mouths and you reprove. And if you're going to have people in your house congregation, or you're going to attend a house group of people that come together for whatever association or partaking you have planned, or like one of the scenarios we kind of mentioned earlier that might fit more your circumstances. Okay, well, you got to also be ready to deal with things if they go wrong. Things start going off, as they were. Pay no attention to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn themselves away from the truth. Right there. That, turn away from the truth. What's the truth? What's the explicit teaching of the Bible that doesn't violate its context and historical culture and setting? Very obvious, very easy. So don't let that happen. If this starts to happen, just stay away. Whoa. Okay, well, if it's their house, well, then you either say what you got to say. Obviously, if they ask you to leave or something goes bad, right? We don't have a problem with people, but we don't want to tolerate error, right? False doctrine being promoted and people being subverted, right? Whole households going down. But, other than staying up and saying, objecting to the false doctrine, say an example, right? So people know, hey, wait, if you choose to stay, this is false doctrine, but it's up to you. Or if it's your house, right, then you can just ask the person, hey, if you're going to keep talking about flat earth and all this garbage, right? Flat earth, obviously people can be misled into flat earth and often are because they don't know enough technically about it to deal with whack jobs. It's not like a salvation issue, but if over time you keep promoting something like flat earth or an equivalent false doctrine, well, you're lying, right? Now lying is a salvation issue. So if you're a committed flat earther and you're lying, yeah, it's game over for you. We're not here for ridiculousness didn't you read Revelation? The one liking and carrying on a lie. So we're not going to do that. Last text, one we've read many times. Let's take a closer look at this one, though. Especially on the heels of Titus. Well, we got these people perving out, and we got to stop them if they do that. They'll subvert the whole house of Christians if you don't. You turn away from the truth, right? There's your mark, right? There's how you know. Once they're away from the truth, the word is the truth, right? The Bible. Accepted text for us, the authoritative text. We're not saying everyone has to accept that, but we do. So if there's a shared acceptance of the authority, boom. You turn away from that or not. 2 John 1:8 through 11. Look out for yourselves, that you do not lose the things we've worked to produce, but that you may obtain a full reward. Everyone that pushes ahead and does not remain in the teaching of the Christ does not have God. All right, now Watchtower, you guys use this totally out of context, right? If you guys are the ones who push ahead more than anyone. You're literally out there proclaiming things that have nothing to do with that, right? No. And no. All kinds of interpretation means which you don't even believe anymore. No. Pushing ahead is like the definition of Watchtower, right? They are probably the most guilty of that. Pushing ahead of the teaching of the Christ. So you guys can knock it off anytime. And from the looks of it, it doesn't matter whether you choose to or not. You guys are going to get punished for failing to stand up against these people. Like the Master told you should have done in Revelation chapter 2. Letting these people perv out, push ahead, subvert entire households. No, the teaching of the Christ is what makes the determination. He that does not remain in this teaching is the one that has both. He that does remain in this teaching is the one that has both the Father and the Son. Why doesn't it say the Holy Spirit there, Trinitarians? Why is it only the Father and the Son? If the whole teaching of the Son is about the Trinity. Yeah, I don't think you can explain that. Verse 10, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, never receive him into your homes or say a greeting to him. For he that says a greeting to him is a sharer in his wicked works. Okay, this is where we're going to end it, but let's focus on this for a moment. Right, so if anyone comes to you with this right here, this teaching, that's a big one. But never receive him into your homes. Let's focus on that part because we're talking about, the greeting part's important too, but homes, right? See, right here, to time with what I'm really trying to make sure you see is the way they were meeting, the way I think we should meet, and we do meet, but we should keep meeting, versus like get more into costs and expenses in ways that don't reflect the New Testament, right? Make it harder for us to help people who legitimately need it. Yeah, see, he's not saying never receive him at the temple, right? Or never receive him into the synagogue because they don't control that anyway. What do they control, right? What would they control where they're meeting regularly and be able to determine whether people come in or not? Exactly. The homes, right? It says right there. That's the only thing he identifies as something they should be worried about. Because that's in what I think I've shown, what the Bible teaches. That's the only place they were regularly meeting. So that's where they were teaching each other. That's where they were praying together. That's where they were doing everything. Unless it was in public, which they also did. But when it was like more personal or private outside of the public, synagogue, temple, various other public places, it's the homes. And so that's why he only mentions that. Okay, if this person someone comes to you and doesn't bring this teaching, well, what teaching? They made, well, the things that work produce, he that pushes ahead does not, and does this teaching is effectively what it's talking about. Everyone that pushes ahead and doesn't remain in the teaching of the Christ doesn't have God. That right here shows that we're only supposed to be looking at the Bible. Is there somewhere else we're supposed to be looking for the teachings of the Christ? Well, I'm not talking about Mormons. I know the answer there. But okay, so groups like Watchtower that really use this text to destroy families. Oh yeah, they do. I lost contact with all my, and mine was not even the worst case by far. They apply this whole about the teaching, this teaching. They make that about everything. 1914, anything that governing body says you have to, that they teach, it's all of it. Pretty much, the result would be the same. And they don't make it contextually limited to what it actually is attached to. Pushing ahead and not remaining in the teaching of Jesus. Well, Jesus didn't say anything about you guys meeting in back rooms to decide the spiritual relationship between someone and the whole congregation. You know what he said to do in Matthew 18? Person involved directly goes to that person directly. And if that doesn't work, they bring one other witness. If that doesn't work, guess what? Whole congregation gets to see what's going on, so we don't have to rely on a bunch of liars and perverts. Exactly. It's so perfect. It works so well. And yet, you guys don't follow it. All of these people are not following, not just Watchtower, right? Most groups. They seem to have a real problem with how they deal with things because their structure, their authority structure, right? The money, the power, it makes those things more effective for them. But they end up just destroying their relationship with what the Bible teaches. So really, Watchtower people, we're the ones who shouldn't be accepting you into our homes, right? You guys are the ones out there lying in God's name repeatedly without repentance, trusting people 100%. The Bible tells you not to do that. Calling yourselves the truth, you're not the truth. Jesus is the truth. Requiring all this false chronology and prophecy and strange beliefs like related to medicinal uses of blood that aren't explicitly taught in the Bible, or you're a heretic, condemned forever, apostate, no family, no friends, no nothing. This is insanity. And you can't see it, you're not looking. At some point, you're not looking. It's not always easy to see. It takes a while for everybody. At some point, you're not looking if you can't see these things, because they're right there, right? They're not like hidden. It's obvious. You guys apply this text to us. Doesn't apply to us. We're not pushing ahead. Does it sound like we're pushing ahead from our teaching tonight? No, it sounds to me like we're teaching it just right. We're like literally teaching exactly what the master and his earliest followers said, and we're encouraging people to meet exactly how they met. And we don't exclude people unless they're perverts, lying to people with false teachings, deviating from the truth, right here, Titus 1:14, or pushing ahead and not remaining in the teaching of the Christ, i.e. the Bible, okay, the accepted text of the Bible that talk about Jesus and his teachings. That's all that's talking about. So it actually, I do believe, applies to Watchtower. They have pushed ahead. They have not remained in the teaching of the Christ. Guess what? It also applies to Trinitarians. Have they not pushed ahead and failed to remain in the teaching of the Christ? Father's a spirit, worshiping him in spirit and in truth, the only true God, my God and your God, just to pick one issue. Of course they have, right? And that's why they do things that show they don't have God. Very often, and more often than not, right? Doesn't mean they don't have people who don't believe in God. Remember, we talked about it. Well, with 2 coins, they're there. But what's there most often? People pushing ahead? It kind of looks like that. Not remaining in the teaching of the Christ? It sure looks like that. Boy, I'm glad we don't look like that. Aren't you guys? Now, to what extent you got, I wouldn't, we're talking about bringing them into our homes, right? Or, if we're talking about saying a greeting, well, it's become more easy today to greet people of other faiths in ways that, if you really add up what their faith is saying, it clearly isn't the teaching of the Christ, right? But we've sort of accepted a certain level of common courtesy, where even a greeting isn't out of place at times. It's almost required in our society for normal behavior. But it's really up to each person to what extent a person may be an overt, liar. I don't think even in a society where it's customary to greet people that you totally disagree with religiously, where if someone's an obvious liar and you know that you've seen it many times, right? Well, most of the time that would be an exception. And we're not meant to include people whose behavior is pathetic and wicked in normal social conventions. They deserve a different treatment, right? Because they're bad people. So that's up for you to decide. But when it comes to like meeting in homes, right? Or even online, right? It's again a little more open here because of the way that the media and the internet and things are publicly available outside of private streams and things. Otherwise, when it's more personal and in these ways where you're meeting in a home, be more careful, right? Be more cautious. Are they bringing the teaching of the Christ or not? If not, I'm not going to have them in my home for the meal or for any kind of worship. But, that doesn't mean I'll never have them over for other things socially or just common activities. So let's try to put this in the right context, right? That doesn't mean I'll have everybody over for the, I try to be selective. But again, we're talking about meeting in homes with other Christians in ways that are going to be productive. Look, right here. Don't lose the things you work so hard to produce. Get your full reward. Let's do it. This isn't a sunk cost fallacy. We believe in this stuff. We believe if we keep going, it only gets better for us. Right? So be more selective when you're meeting together personally or directly. I don't care where it is. It says right here, if they don't stay in the teaching of the Christ, they don't have God. And if you're arguing with Trinitarians or Watchtower people or others, well, that's good. You want to try to help them, but you don't want to burn out and you don't want to frustrate yourself, right? They don't have God. But do you want to be around people that have God, or do you want to be around people that don't have God and just argue with them? Yep. It should be pretty limited on one side, don't you think? Not entirely. But, especially when you're meeting in your homes for worship, I don't think that would be the place for arguing with perverts and people that don't have God, right? So there's clearly some measure of care we need to exercise about people we get close to for these reasons. So I wanted to have this discussion with you and make sure that we all kind of have an ongoing appreciation for what the Bible teaches about how we can make the most out of time we spend together, in person or online, whether we meet together for a ride or for coffee or tea or other kind of break. It's not that hard to just read a wise saying, have a quick prayer, see how people are doing. If you got bread and wine there, why not, right? That's what we come together for. So can't always do it if it's not conveniently available, but when it is, take advantage of it. We partake because we're told to. We're told that by doing so, we will have life because it shows our faith in the sacrifice that Jesus made, his physical body and the blood that he gave on our behalf. In worship, of one God the Father. And who became the one Lord? Jesus Christ. With that, I'll take a quick look. See how you all are doing. Very nice. Single cell organism showed up. See, I hate the misty one. DW_S. It's pretty pumped up. Glad you're enjoying it. Sorry if I missed you. Good to see everyone. So I won't be live again for a few weeks. Be back first, second week in August. But I may have some uploads. So I'll do what I can and post where I can in the community section. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. I post mostly the same things in the community section and on Twitter, but not always. So either way, whichever one's easier for you. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again live. And until then, may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name.